So I'm going to do a reading from this section of my book that I wrote about Atlanticism. So hold your horses, and I'm just going to read you the section in my book about Atlanticism as a phenomenon involving the rise of imperialism. So, yes, the new book, hey, it's selling, people are buying it, people are liking it. This is the section from my new book, City Builders and Vandals in Our Age. This is the section, The Atlanticist Pathology, a Mindset from Hell. The dawn of imperialism, a new stage of the capitalist economy, greatly changed social relations. It resulted in a state of mind unfolding in the Western world that can accurately be described as the Atlanticist pathology. The ruling class of Britain, led by its royal family, boasts about being descended from the Normans, a Germanic tribe of Vandals and Odinists, who seized England at the famous Battle of Hastings in the year of 1066. The Viking raiders of the sea and the Vandal tribes of the forest did not build cities, they raided them. They stole from those who had constructed. They went to what had already been created and looted it. And in some cases, they destroyed it. As the British industrialists subordinated themselves to entities like the East India Company and the various finance houses of the London Stock Exchange, this predatory and destructive means of existence came to dominate the international markets. Various geopolitical analysts have referred to Atlanticism as a trend among Western nations throughout history who have prioritized control of trade routes and maritime dominance over economic development on the mainland. The Queen's Empire infamously burned down the various looms of India and Bangladesh, as the colonizer forced a civilization that had been weaving for thousands of years to import its cloth from Britain. China faced 2 opium wars in response to the emperor's efforts to raise living standards and stop the inflow of destruction and plunder. British bankers established the Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation, HSBC Bank, for the purpose of controlling China's economy and keeping a great civilization poor. Heroin and opium became a central aspect of British imperialism. With the force of the British military, various parts of the world were seized, economically looted, and reduced to mere captive markets for British products. Britain was simply the first in line when it came to imperialism. Germany, France, Belgium, and eventually the United States moved into the globalist model of international capitalism. The Western powers began seizing parts of the developing world and, with economies centralized around banking institutions and monopolies protected by the state, extracted immense profits by crippling the developing world. From 1885 to 1908, Belgium oversaw a genocide of roughly 15 million people in the Congo Free State, an African colony under the personal direction of the king. Most of those who perished were worked to death in the process of extracting natural rubber. The United States seized the Philippines during the Spanish-American War, and then from 1899 to 1913 fought against Filipino resistance. Between 250,000 and 1 million Filipino civilians were killed in the course of the fighting. As Britain rose to be the top superpower of capitalism in its imperialist monopoly stage, the writings of Adam Smith came to be the celebrated worldview on economics. Free trade and free competition in one big global market was to tear down international borders and allow the, quote, superior ones to rise to the top. Language lifted from Charles Darwin's biological texts was used to justify the horrendous atrocities carried out to secure London's position as the top dog. The notion of survival of the fittest was nothing new among thieves and criminals, but Darwin's work allowed the British to proclaim their destruction and impoverishment of the world as simply the natural order of things. The British settlers gunned down entire African villages with primitive machine guns, justifying their crimes with social Darwinist rhetoric about inferior races. Rhodesia emerged as an apartheid plantation state named after the great imperialist Cecil Rhodes in the territory that is now called Zimbabwe. Rhodes described the colonization of the world and the enlistment of British workers to be settlers and overseers across the planet as a matter of ensuring social peace and preventing class struggle and revolution. In 1895, Rhodes wrote, quote, "I was in the East End of London, a working-class quarter, yesterday, and I attended a meeting of the unemployed." This is Cecil Rhodes. This is a quote, folks. "I listened to the wild speeches, which were just a cry for bread, bread, and on my way home I pondered over the scene and became even more convinced of the importance of imperialism. My cherished idea is a solution for the social problem, i.e., in order to save the 40 million inhabitants of the United Kingdom from a bloody civil war, we colonial statesmen must acquire new lands to settle the surplus population, to provide new markets for the goods produced in the factories and mines. The empire, as I have always said, is a bread and butter question. If you want to avoid civil war, you must become imperialists." The rise of the Atlanticist pathology involved the promoting of a generalized Vandal mindset among the population. The British homeland, much like Rome, developed a domestic culture designed to breed sadistic raiders and Vandals. In Victorian Britain, parents were encouraged never to hug their children and to greatly restrict their affection. Sadistic corporal punishment became a standard for school children, with rattan canes imported from Asia as treasured implements for inflicting pain. A puritanical and shame-based attitude toward matters of sexuality became widespread. War was glorified in every aspect of life. As British imperialism rode high across the planet, plundering and destroying what is now labeled the Global South, at home, Britain was cultivating a culture of insanity. It was the British Empire that introduced humanity to what is now described as the serial killer, a pattern of criminal behavior in which a man murders women in a sexualized way. London's infamous Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper grabbed headlines in 1888 with his infamous killing and mutilation of prostitutes in London's Whitechapel, the very working-class quarter where Cecil Rhodes had his revelation about the importance of imperialism less than a decade later. As the gruesome details of the murders were reported in the press, the London Times received thousands of letters from individuals hoping to take credit for the unsolved crimes. Most of the letters were anonymous, but they revealed that beneath the surface, many British people, raised in an atmosphere glorifying war, plunder, and punishment amid sexual repression, secretly cherished fantasies about engaging in similar behavior. With so many imposters stealing his spotlight, and this is classic, the actual Whitechapel murderer sent body parts from the victim in a package to prove that he was the real Jack the Ripper. The letter, containing half of a human kidney, was signed "From Hell." Soon, this pattern of serial killers who sexualized their murders became a widespread phenomenon across the Western world, declining only in the past few decades. An article from the Guardian newspaper published in 2018 quotes criminologists noticing this pattern of homicidal behavior has seen a, quote, "clear downward trend from the 1989 peak." Whatever progressivism had been at the foundations of the revolutions to topple feudalism seemed to be pushed into the background with the rise of imperialism, capitalism in its monopoly stage. The new global economic order became an expression of the Atlanticist pathology. The Vandals had seized control of the high seas, and as pirates they proceeded to raid and plunder the entire world. The city builders were in retreat. And that is a section from my new book, City Builders and Vandals in Our Age.